Get real. The Kentucky Derby, the biggest horse race in America, was dominated by black jockeys for decades, winning 15 of the first 28 races, but history erased them like they never existed. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden history of black jockeys in America. If you want to hear about more stories similar to this one, click the link in my bio to get our free 5-story ebook, as well as our free 30-day audiobook trial. I'm your host, Knowledge Man, and this is the Black History League, where we shine a light on the stories they didn't teach you in school. Let's saddle up and get into it. Let's kick things off with the golden age of black jockeys. How did they become the biggest stars in horse racing? Picture this. It's May 17th, 1875, the very first Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. The crowd is buzzing. 10,000 people packed into the stands, sipping mint juleps and betting on their favorites. At the starting gate, a black jockey named Oliver Lewis mounts a horse called Aristides, a chestnut colt owned by H.P. McGrath. The gates fly open, and Lewis and Aristides take off like a bullet, weaving through the pack with precision. They cross the finish line first, clocking in at 2 minutes and 37 seconds, winning the inaugural Derby in front of a roaring crowd. Lewis wasn't a one-off. Black jockeys were the best in the game back then. In the 1800s, horse racing was one of America's biggest sports, even bigger than baseball at the time, and black jockeys dominated it. They won 15 of the first 28 Kentucky Derbies. That's more than half. Let's talk about some of these legends. Isaac Murphy, born in 1861 in Kentucky, became the first jockey to win 3 Derbies, in 1884 on Buchanan, 1890 on Riley, and 1891 on Kingman. Murphy's career win rate was an insane 44%, meaning he won nearly half the races he entered, a record that still stands as one of the best in history. He was so good that he became the first jockey ever inducted into the National Museum of Racing Hall of Fame in 1955, long after his death in 1896. Another star was Alonzo "Lonnie" Clayton, who made history in 1892 at just 15 years old, winning the Derby on Azra and becoming the youngest jockey ever to win, a record he still holds today. Then there was Willie Sims, who won in 1896 on Ben Brush and 1898 on Plaudit, and was the only black jockey to win all 4 of America's major races, including the Belmont Stakes and the Preakness. These jockeys weren't just athletes. They were masters of horsemanship, a skill deeply rooted in African traditions. Many of them, like Murphy, grew up on plantations where they were forced to care for horses as enslaved children, learning how to ride, train, and race from a young age. Their knowledge came from West African equestrian practices, where communities like the Fulani were known for their horse handling skills, a legacy brought to America during the slave trade. After emancipation, they turned that expertise into a career, earning big money and fame in a sport that, for a brief moment, seemed to prioritize talent over race. White trainers and owners trusted black jockeys because they knew they were the best. They understood horses like nobody else, often forming deep bonds with them. Murphy, for example, was known for talking to his horses during races, calming them down to save their energy for the final stretch. By the 1880s, black jockeys were household names. Newspapers called Murphy the king of jockeys, reporting on his $20,000 annual earnings, which is about $600,000 in today's money. He even owned a mansion in Lexington, Kentucky, a rare feat for a black man at the time. But even at their peak, they faced racism. White crowds sometimes booed them, and white jockeys would gang up during races, boxing them out or even whipping them mid-race to throw them off. In 1887, Murphy was nearly killed when white jockeys forced him into a fence during a race in New Jersey, causing a crash that left him with a broken arm. Despite the danger, these jockeys kept winning, proving their talent was undeniable. Black jockeys didn't just participate in horse racing, they ruled it, winning more than half of the early Kentucky Derbies, setting records that still stand, and building a legacy rooted in African horsemanship. But racism was already creeping in, threatening to tear it all down. So if black jockeys were dominating, how did they go from the top of the game to completely disappearing from horse racing. Let's fast forward to the late 1890s, when the golden age of black jockeys started to crumble. Jim Crow laws were spreading across the South, segregating everything from schools to streetcars, and horse racing wasn't spared. The North wasn't much better, with its own brand of racism bubbling under the surface. Black jockeys like Isaac Murphy and Alonzo Clayton were still winning races, but the sport was changing fast. White jockeys, backed by racist unions, started organizing to push black jockeys out. In 1894, the Jockey Club was formed, a powerful group that controlled racing licenses, set rules, and decided who could compete in major races. By 1900, the Jockey Club, led by white elites, began refusing licenses to black jockeys, effectively banning them from the sport's biggest stages. Let's zoom in on Jimmy Winkfield, one of the last black jockeys to make it big in America. Born in 1882 in Kentucky, Winkfield was a rising star, winning the Kentucky Derby back-to-back in 1901 on his Eminence and 1902 on Allena Dale. He was known for his daring style, riding low and fast, often taking the inside track to steal the lead. Fans loved him, and he earned over $15,000 a year, a fortune at the time. But by 1903, Winkfield couldn't get a single mount at Churchill Downs. White jockeys threatened to boycott races if he was allowed to ride, and the Jockey Club officially banned him from competing in the US. Winkfield had no choice but to flee to Europe, where he became a superstar in Russia. He won the Emperor's Purse in 1904, raced for the Tsar, and even survived the Russian Revolution, later moving to France to continue his career. He won over 2,600 races in his lifetime, but back in America, his name was forgotten. The erasure didn't stop with Winkfield. After 1902, black jockeys were systematically pushed out of the sport. The last black jockey to compete in the Derby before the long drought was Henry King in 1921, finishing 10th. After that, the Kentucky Derby didn't see another black jockey for 79 years, until Marlon St. Julian rode in 2000, finishing 7th. It wasn't just jockeys. Black trainers, grooms, and stable hands were forced out too. By the 1920s, horse racing was completely segregated, and white jockeys took over the spotlight. Newspapers stopped mentioning black jockeys' past victories, and history books rewrote the story to make it seem like black jockeys were never a big deal. For example, the 1920s saw the rise of white jockeys like Earl Sandy, who was celebrated as the new face of racing, while black jockeys were erased from the narrative. Systemic racism went deeper. Black jockeys couldn't afford to own horses or land to start their own stables, thanks to discriminatory laws that kept them in poverty. Redlining and loan discrimination meant they couldn't access the capital needed to stay in the game, while white owners and jockeys built dynasties off the foundation black jockeys had laid. Even the cultural memory of black jockeys faded. Hollywood westerns and racing films of the 1930s and 40s, like Seabiscuit, only showed white jockeys, ignoring the sport's diverse history. The erasure was so complete that by the 1950s, most Americans had no idea black jockeys had ever dominated the sport, let alone shaped its early years. Now that we know how they were erased, let's talk about today. How are we bringing black jockeys back into the spotlight they deserve? It's 2025, and the fight to honor black jockeys is finally gaining momentum, but it's been a long, hard road to get here. Let's go back to the 1980s, when historians first started digging into the history of black jockeys. In 1986, the book Black Winning Jockeys in the Kentucky Derby by James Robert Saunders and Monica Renee Saunders sparked renewed interest, detailing the lives of jockeys like Isaac Murphy and Jimmy Winkfield. That book inspired the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame to start inducting more black jockeys from the 1800s. Winkfield was finally honored in 2004, 101 years after his last Derby win, and Alonzo Clayton followed in 2012. These inductions were a big deal. Historians had to comb through old newspapers, racing logs, and even family oral histories to piece together their stories, since so much had been erased. In 2013, the Kentucky Derby Museum in Louisville took it a step further. opening a permanent exhibit called African Americans in Thoroughbred Racing. The exhibit features artifacts like Isaac Murphy's riding boots, Alonzo Clayton's saddle, and a jockey silk worn by Willie Sims in 1898, alongside panels telling their stories. Over 50,000 visitors a year now learn about the black jockeys who made the Derby what it is, and the museum has hosted events like Legends Day, where descendants of these jockeys share their family histories. But it's not just about looking back. Modern black jockeys are reclaiming the tracks and carrying the torch. Kendrick Carmouche is a perfect example. Born in 1984 in Louisiana, Carmouche grew up around horses, inspired by his father, a jockey himself. As of 2025, Carmouche has over 3,500 career wins, making him one of the top jockeys in America. In 2021, he made history as the first black jockey in 105 years to compete in the Kentucky Derby's main field, riding Bourbonic and finishing 11th. He's been vocal about the legacy of black jockeys, saying in a 2023 interview with ESPN, "I ride for Isaac Murphy, for Jimmy Winkfield. I'm carrying their dreams every time I get on a horse." Carmouche has also mentored young black jockeys, helping them navigate a sport that's still tough to break into. There's also a growing movement to support young black equestrians through programs like the Ed Brown Society, named after Edward Dudley Brown, a black jockey and trainer from the 1870s who won the Belmont Stakes in 1870. Founded in 2020, the Ed Brown Society offers scholarships, mentorship, and training for black kids interested in horse racing, tackling barriers like the high cost of equipment. Saddles alone can cost $5,000. And the lack of diversity in the sport. In 2023, they hosted the first ever Black Jockeys Day at Churchill Downs, where they honored living black jockeys like Carmouche and raised over $100,000 for youth programs. They even unveiled a mural of Isaac Murphy at the track, a permanent reminder of his legacy. But the fight isn't over. Horse racing is still a predominantly white sport. Less than 5% of jockeys today are black, and many tracks don't even mention the history of black jockeys in their programs or tours. For example, Saratoga Racecourse, one of the oldest tracks in America, has no permanent exhibit on black jockeys, despite their early dominance there. Activists are pushing for more statues, like the one of Isaac Murphy unveiled in Lexington in 2022, more exhibits, and even a National Black Jockeys Day to celebrate their contributions. And honestly, after learning this history, I'm all for it. Black jockeys are finally getting the recognition they deserve, from museum exhibits to modern trailblazers like Kendrick Carmouche, but there's still work to do to fully reclaim their legacy, break down barriers, and make horse racing a space where black talent can thrive again. That's the untold story of black jockeys, a legacy of dominance, erasure, and a fight for recognition that's still going strong in 2025. If you love this deep dive, you can find more stories like this on our website, theblackhistoryleague.com, or right here on the Black History League YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss a thing. We've got more videos coming your way, like the history of black cowboys, the legacy of black sailors, the untold stories of black inventors, and the black women who shaped American fashion. Want to support us? Your support helps us keep telling these stories and shining a light on black history. I'm Knowledge Man, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Stay curious, stay proud, and let's keep celebrating the legacy of our people.